Welcome back, everybody, to a brand new episode of Benchwarmers Sports Talk. And today we are still warming the bench in the NHL, maybe for not much longer, but with the Dallas Stars winning last night in double overtime. Corey Perry with 2 goals to keep the Dallas Stars' hopes alive. So today we'll talk some NHL, we'll talk some NBA as we're getting into championship season. Of course, the Lakers, the first of the teams to book their ticket to the NBA Finals. And then the playoffs are starting up in Major League Baseball, and it's something that we really haven't talked about too much. And so we'll get into some baseball talk later on and some much more as well. But of course, we will start, as always, by introducing Jacob is alongside me like usual. Jacob, how are you doing?
It's a good day today. Good day for sports. Lots of football, too, we can talk about as we go on the update, if need be.
Absolutely. But let's talk about the hockey. Your thoughts on the series so far between Dallas and Tampa?
Take in, the last 6 goals scored by Dallas have been Corey Perry and Joe Pavelski.
Yep.
I don't know what happened to the rest of Dallas. You know, Gurianov, Kiviranta, like where did all them go? Like, and Sagan still doesn't have a goal. And
I mean, credit to Sagan. He's had a lot of assists recently. So
yeah, okay.
he has stepped up a little bit more. But I mean, you're right. He's typically a goal scorer, and we haven't seen him do that much in the playoffs, let alone in the finals.
For someone who's cheering for Tampa, you know, Dallas is really an annoying thorn in the side of you. That obviously, if you watched the game last night, you'd know that Tampa was absolutely dominant there. Like,
the better team for sure.
No, they should have won. Like, the goal they scored was a greasy Corey Perry goal. It's in the net, you know. It's a frantic scramble and just happens to get on the stick and in the back of the net.
But those are the kind of goals that get scored. I mean, you look at Game 4, right? The overtime winner from Shattenkirk. That's just a shot that goes through traffic and it's just one of those seeing shots. It finds a way through, right? And the Tampa goal is the Dallas goal in Game 5. It's just you throw pucks to the front of the net, and Corey Perry's been doing that for the last 15 years.
Yeah, I know.
And he's still doing it at like 30, whatever he is now. But
it's really surprising that the veterans are the ones. But at the same time, that shows how much leadership they are. You know, Corey Perry back when he was on Anaheim, you could argue he was more of a leadership than Getzlaf at sometimes in his career. And then Pavelski in San Jose leading them to that Cup final.
And that's the thing. People were saying that it's a nice balance because you have one veteran in Corey Perry who's won a Stanley Cup, albeit way back in 2007, but he's won a Stanley Cup. And so he's sort of the guy who's been there and knows what when then you have a guy like Pavelski, who, yes, he's been to a finals more recently with San Jose in 2016.
Yep.
But he hasn't won the cup. And so there's that new veteran presence of that hunger of, you know, for Pavelski, this honestly might be his last shot.
Yeah.
Right?
Honestly, I'd love to see him win a cup, but I just don't think it'll happen this year.
Yeah.
I think what's happened is they're just delaying the inevitable. And, you know, if Dallas comes back and wins the Stanley Cup, good on them. Good on Pavelski. Man deserves a cup. You know, Dobby's been lights out pretty much this entire playoffs. In the absence of Ben Bishop, who everyone thought was their go-to guy. So that'll be very interesting this next offseason for Dallas.
Yeah.
But, you know, I don't want Tampa to win. I just think they deserve to win a little bit more.
Right. I mean, I think that if you've watched the series, you can't argue that Tampa's been the better team.
Well, 100% they've been the better team.
Over the course of the series.
Oh, for sure.
The one thing I will say, though, is, and I know I've been saying it the entire time that we've talked about it on the podcast, which is how much do you trust Tampa? Yes, they're the best team on paper. Yes, they're playing like the best team, but, you know, they've always choked and they've never found a way to get over that hump.
Right.
Now, once again, I can't say that anymore because they're one win away from the Stanley Cup and they're playing like they, you know, deserve to win it. But at the same time, part of me in the back of my mind,
a little bit of doubt.
Not that there's a little bit of doubt, but now it's more so just like how peak Tampa Bay would it be if they were to blow a 3-1 lead
in the Stanley Cup Finals?
In the Stanley Cup Finals.
I'm not really worried too much right now. If they lose the next game, I'm gonna start to get concerned.
Well, and that's the thing is, you know, when you're up 3-1, obviously it's a dominant series lead.
Pretty comfortable lead.
But if you look at the way the series is gone, Game 4 goes to overtime, Game 5 goes to overtime.
Double overtime.
Exactly. Game 6, now you're headed to Game 6. If Dallas wins Game 6, anything can happen in Game 7.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're Tampa, right, you're already in a situation where the last 2 games really could have gone either way. Like, I'd say Tampa played better, but both games could go either way. You're looking at 2 overtime games.
Yep.
And you don't want to take it to a Game 7 because anything can happen in a Game 7, right? I mean, you look last year, St. Louis went into Boston in Game 7 and shut them down.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, no home ice advantage, so that takes away anything. So I think Game 7 would be a true toss-up if you went there.
Well, I really don't hope like, if you're a hockey fan, you want it to go to 7 games. Like, wouldn't that be great? Overtime in the Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals?
And the other thing that I'll say is why I wanted to go to Game 7 is because I think the NHL has botched the scheduling of this series. Like, they played Game 4 or 5 on back-to-back nights.
Yeah, you can't do that.
Which you can't do that in the finals.
No.
And the other thing is, now with them playing back-to-back nights, that means that Game 6 is Monday, Game 7 would be Wednesday.
Yeah.
Game 6 on Monday night is going to compete with Monday Night Football, and the matchup this week on Monday Night Football is Chiefs and Ravens, which is like one of the best games that the NFL is going to get this season.
Oh, for sure.
And so the NHL, with the Stanley Cup in the building, is going to have to compete with a football game that they know is going to get huge ratings numbers. And this just goes to speak again about how the NHL does a terrible job marketing their sport.
I agree. I also think, though, I don't want to take away from the Chiefs and Ravens. Obviously, that's going to be one hell of a game, maybe the best one all season. But I mean, it's the Stanley Cup Finals.
Yeah.
This is like one of the greatest trophies to win in sports.
No, of course. My point is, though, you don't want to compete with something like you want the stage all to yourself.
Right. No, I get that. And yeah, I know it was terrible marketing. They should have played Game 5 tonight.
Game 5 should have been tonight.
And then Game 6 would have
Tuesday,
been
Thursday,
which does not compete with Thursday Night Football.
But no one watches Thursday Night Football.
Yeah. Exactly. But yeah, I think you're right with them definitely not picking or scheduling the right. I don't know why they went back to back.
Yeah, and the other controversial thing is going back to Game 4. Your thoughts on the penalties and the calls that were or weren't made?
So I preach this. I don't know if I preach this to you, but I'm in my school chat and I'm saying the refs have been so all over the place this series. Game 4, that penalty. I mean, was it a penalty? No. But then you can argue that neither was Game 7 of the, last year versus Vegas and San Jose. Like, those are very two soft calls.
Yeah.
So I think it's a little bit of karma against Pavelski, and I think that's it. And I just don't like Corey Perry. He's annoying.
I mean, they called Braden Point, I believe it was, for embellishment earlier.
Who calls an embellishment in the Stanley Cup Finals?
Not only that, but it wasn't, he fully got a stick to the crotch. And they called him for embellishment. Like, that's the kind of thing that you don't embellish.
Yeah, you don't embellish. It hurts.
Like, you know when you get hit in the crotch. Like, that's not something that you fake. And so I think that maybe it was a little bit of a makeup. But at the same time, I mean, looking at the replay, Ben should not be doing that.
I agree. I think
it's a bit soft, but he shouldn't be giving the referee the option to. That's a stupid play. You don't make that play.
I agree, and he should know better as the captain.
Exactly.
But at the same time, that was soft.
It was on the soft side.
It was on the softer side.
But I think Ben's been disappointing this series.
A lot of Dallas Stars. So last night there were so many. There was a high stick call on Braden Point about 10 minutes into the second overtime.
I thought that was a high stick. I
thought it was too.
Yeah.
But 30 seconds before that, Point gets tripped.
Right. Yeah.
And there's nothing. It was a blatant trip too.
Yeah.
So if you're gonna call a high stick, you better call the trip.
Yeah.
If you're gonna be inconsistent, be inconsistently bad for both teams. Don't call this and then call that.
Right. And I think you make the good point. It's about consistency. You either call it both ways or you don't call it both ways.
Yeah, and I know they don't want to call. Obviously, they don't want to call it the Stanley Cup Finals. They don't want to interfere with the game too much. But when the guy's getting blatantly tripped in front of your face, like Francis Chiron, you need to call that call.
Yeah.
You cannot let that go in front of your face. You cannot.
Yeah.
Because now you're going to have criticism. Oh, you guys didn't do enough. And they show the highlight reel of how many missed calls there were. There was 15 missed calls in the first overtime alone. And I understand, sometimes some hits will be questionable, but because they're questionable, you don't really call it. But I mean, when points getting tripped, and then he's high sticking dudes, and you make a call, make a consistent call. Don't make it for one team and not for the other.
And that might be another reason to see how Tampa has been the more dominant team, because typically if you're taking hooking, tripping, those types of calls, holding calls, you're typically a step behind. And I think we've seen that Dallas is trying to compete on the same level as Tampa, and they're having a tough time where they're having to do these small little trips and hooks and holds.
And because it's the finals, they're getting away with it.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's, what Dallas, Tampa's last few penalties have been high sticks or a trip. While, Dallas's should have been a hooking, a tripping, a slashing, and interference.
And another huge factor is this Tampa Bay power play.
That's ridiculous.
Dallas has no answer.
Well, Shattenkirk scored on the power play.
Exactly.
And he's on the second unit.
Yeah.
If you can't even contain the first unit, what makes you think you're going to get the second?
Yeah. Yeah, no, if the second unit's scoring on you, then that's a huge problem because, typically it's the first unit that is the one that poses.
Well, it's the one that that's the one that's the most dominant.
Exactly.
So if you can't even contain the second unit, what makes you think you're going to last the first?
Exactly.
And obviously the refs, I think going after that game number 4, they score on the power play from that call. The refs are like, okay, we can't make any calls like that again, or else it's gonna, we make a call like that in an overtime if it goes to next overtime, and there's the Stanley Cup. It could go. And
then with people saying, the last thing I'll say with the penalty is, obviously for people who are saying the Ben call is a little bit soft, and I'd agree with that, but Dallas had a 4-on-3 power play to start overtime.
There's no excuse for that.
And they couldn't convert, right?
No.
So maybe the penalty was a little bit soft, sure, but if you can score on your power play, that never happens. Right, so
game's over.
Yes, you do have to judge the referees, and yes, the referees do have an influence on the game, maybe a little bit too much, and it is fair to point that out. But at the same time, Dallas was given a power play opportunity in overtime, and they couldn't convert, and then Tampa was given one 5 minutes later, and they were able to convert.
Yeah, and I guess it goes to show, how do you react to this power play? Are you gonna cry about it and pout, or are you Tampa? They stood on the ground, they killed that 4-on-3, then they get a power play and they capitalize. Like Dallas, you can't be stuck on that bad call. Obviously, bad calls will be made.
Yeah.
It's just natural. We can go back to the hand pass against St. Louis last year with San Jose. So this Pavelski gets 2 calls in that series against, or no, not in the next. Yeah, no. So he gets, in that playoffs, he got 2 calls against, that went for him.
Yeah.
Even though A, one was not a 5-minute major, and B, the other one was way too much of a hand pass.
Right.
So it kind of goes to show, are you going to sit and cry about it, or are you going to go out there on on a penalty kill and kill that penalty so that you have a chance to win?
Absolutely. And I like you say, you can see it both ways, where you can be critical of the referees, but at the same time, you can also be critical of the team's performance. And you use that 5-minute major as an example that happened a couple of years ago.
Oh man, 3 goals in that place?
Well, that's the point. You can be critical of the mistake that the referees made, but also how much of the blame goes to shipping 4 power play goals in 5 minutes, right?
No, I know, and it's no excuse. Obviously, I don't want to rip on the refs too much. Their job is just as hard as the players. Like
you're saying, you have to attribute blame to everybody involved.
So,
Absolutely.
So my whole, just to sum it up, basically, the refs are garbage. They always have been. They always will be. In a fan's perspective, whether the call goes for or goes against us, they're doing their best. They have the best refs there right now.
It's just another thing you have to deal with.
Yeah, you know what? Honestly, 100%. Back when we used to play soccer, we get some bad calls against us that led to some game winners. You pissed off in the moment, but you suck it up and you play the game.
Yeah.
You can't be sad if there's a penalty shot that goes against you. You can't be mad if it's a 2-minute major in this case. You just kind of gotta. All right, well that was stupid. Let's just get back in there and play.
Yeah. Moving on to other news around the NHL. A couple of trades went down over the last week. So the first big trade is the Rangers trading defenseman Mark Staal and a second-round pick to Detroit for future considerations.
Staal brothers still live on.
Yes. Now, this one I found interesting because obviously we are still trying to figure out what the cap implications are going to be with COVID. And obviously, I think cap is going to be at an all-time premium this year. And you talked about the Leafs having to give up a first-rounder to dump Marlowe's salary last year.
Yeah.
And we're seeing something very similar here where the Rangers have to give up a second-rounder to dump Staal's $5.7 million cap hit.
Yeah.
So, honestly, I think this is an example, and I'll get into the Penguins trade in a bit, and the reason why I wanted to lead with this one is I can see why this is an example of a win-win for both teams because, the Red Wings need to fill out roster, right? They don't care about cap because they don't have anyone that they need to pay right now. So 1 year
Right.
at 5.7
Yeah.
doesn't hurt them, and they get the second rounder. And for the Rangers, the only thing that they wanted in return is that cap space, right? So that they can figure out they can manage their own roster. And so,
I agree.
even though it's for future considerations, it'll probably be like a 7th round pick or something if we're being honest, or maybe like a random roster player on a league minimum salary. But it's a win for the Rangers because they get that flexibility with the cap.
I agree. Yeah, I think it was a good trade for both teams. I think this is one of the trades that kind of goes under the radar just because of other trades that have happened so far.
Right.
Obviously, Mark Staal, he had his years. The Staal brothers, they've kind of all passed. Jordan, I would argue, is the best one still. The Carolina Hurricanes captain.
Eric Staal.
No, Eric Stahl's on Buffalo.
I think Eric Staal is the best Staal. But
I think Jordan Staal.
That's fair.
Just because of what he's produced in the last few years. To each one own. Mark Stahl's a good defenseman. He had a couple good years in the past. I don't know how he's going to be now.
Yeah,
he's a little old.
But you think he'll find a spot on that roster in Detroit?
Yeah, I think so. I think he'll do okay over on the Red Wings.
Yeah.
It's kind of a team that no one really gives a crap about. I think that's the Rangers is definitely a far more mainstream team,
right?
Especially with the talent they have now. So
and the a couple important draft picks coming up.
This draft is going to be fun.
Yeah.
Especially because we have that Pittsburgh first rounder. Shall I remind you?
Yeah, which is probably a good way to transition into the other trade that happened.
Oh, this trade was so bad.
So Jim Rutherford at it again. Patrick Hornqvist gets traded from the Pittsburgh Penguins to the Florida Panthers in exchange for Mike Matheson and Colton Sevier. Before I go on my rant, your thoughts on the trade?
What was Rutherford doing here? Patrick Hornqvist will still produce. Patrick Hornqvist is very important to you guys kind of making the playoffs next year. And let's trade him for a pylon and a little bit less.
Yeah.
I know you're going to have quite a rant on this one. I know this one definitely you did not like. Neither did Patrick Hornqvist. He threw his stuff outside.
The one thing I'll say about that is I'm of the belief that he's just airing out his equipment. So I don't think he threw all his gear out out of frustration.
No.
But I will say that he said he felt backstabbed by the team, and I completely agree with him. We've done him dirty. And
what was Rutherford? Was there any talks with him prior that he was going to get?
And that's why I think we went about this trade the wrong way, because this trade was initially broke, and then it was delayed. And the reason it was delayed was because Hornqvist has a no trade clause, and the Penguins needed his approval, and so the trade didn't happen until the next day. And that just shows to me that the Penguins mismanaged this, because if you're planning on trading a guy who has a no-trade clause, you typically ask him about it before anything breaks because you need his approval. And so for them to say that they're going to make the trade and then ask him after the fact, to me, is very disrespectful towards the player.
Why wouldn't you ask him first?
Exactly.
What were they thinking, being you know what, we're going to make a trade. Oh, Patrick, you okay with that? Okay, we're going to trade you anyways.
Yeah.
And I'm sure he said no.
Well, and I think that was the reason why he ended up agreeing, because his statement was he felt like Pittsburgh didn't want him anymore and Florida did. And he said he felt backstabbed and blindsided, was the word he used.
Blindsided. Let me see if I can pull up the tweet.
And so it was for that reason that he said it was an easy decision. I don't think he definitely didn't want to leave Pittsburgh, but he felt disrespected by the organization, and I think that made it easier for him to agree to leave. And then in terms of the trade itself, a couple of tweets I saw that I really agreed with. First of all, with just the notion of trading Patrick Hornqvist to begin with, I was all right with that, because as much as I know he can produce, he's making $5.3 million.
Yeah.
And he's 33 years old, and he's coming off an injury-shortened season. So I understand the desire to maybe try to move away from that. I'm fine with that. And so I agree with this here, where it says I have no problem with trading Hornqvist, but I do have a problem trading him for a subpar defenseman and nixing any cap relief the trade would otherwise provide.
Yeah, he said, when I found out Pittsburgh didn't want me and Florida wanted me, it was an easy choice.
Yeah. And so the thing with that is, I understand. It's kind of like the Staal trade, right? Like Staal is a solid depth defenseman for the Rangers, but not at $5.7 million.
Yeah.
So you trade him, but by trading him, you free up the $5.7 million.
But
what we did instead in Pittsburgh is we traded him.
Oh yeah.
And we actually increased our cap intake because we traded for Mike Matheson, a guy who's got 6 years left at $4.8 million. The same Mike Matheson who was moved from defense to forward because Florida was afraid that he was turning the puck over too much on defense. And the same Mike Matheson who was a healthy scratch during the playoffs because they didn't trust him defensively, who's got 6 years left at $4.8 million. That's why I don't like this trade, because it doesn't make sense. By the way, Mike Matheson, left shot defenseman.
You know how many of those?
We have 6 left shot defensemen now.
What including him and Jack Johnson?
Including Jack Johnson and Matheson. So Jack Johnson and Matheson are number 4 and number 5. You could even argue 5 and 6 on our depth chart at left D, and the two of them combined are making almost $8 million this year. So it doesn't make any sense.
Oh, and I think this goes back to Rutherford's whole thing with it has to be a fair deal for both teams.
Yeah.
Look, go back to Toronto. We stole that from you.
Yes. And the other thing too is when this trade first got broke, like I said, it didn't happen until the day after. The day that it got broke but then was delayed, Penguins fans were very vocal about this being a terrible trade.
So there could have been,
and
he
them
could have
not
said
liking
no.
it.
He could have said no.
He had a full 24 hours to take, because normally when you make a trade, you don't know how the fans are going to react until it's made.
So when you have time to do it, you can look at the feedback.
24 hours to listen to the Penguins fan base say that they hated this trade, and not for emotional reasons because we love Hornqvist, as much as that's true, but for legitimate like GM significant reasons, issues with cap space and roster construction and
injury concerns,
serious like legitimate concerns, not just I love Hornqvist, he was my guy, right? Which is true, I loved Hornqvist, he was my guy, but I understood why we wanted to trade him. My point is, why are we trading him and not freeing up cap space? And then not only do they make the trade a day later, they add Colton Sevier, which is like, great, a penalty kill fourth liner that like I'm fine with Sevier coming in, but now we're actually taking in $6 million in cap and trading out 5.3. So we're actually increasing the cap. And then there was the press conference that Jim Rutherford had to talk about the trade.
Oh yes.
And a reporter asked the question, and this is word for word the transcription. The reporter asks the question, quote, "How do you feel about your cap situation right now? This didn't save you any money." Jim Rutherford's direct quote in response to this at the press conference is, "It saved us a hair, but, well, no, you're right, it didn't. I'm not comfortable with it." So this is a guy who makes a trade and doesn't realize that he's getting more cap in when we're supposed to be clearing up cap space because, we have 2 goalies who are restricted free agents who need to get signed to contracts.
This guy is your GM.
Now, the one thing I will like about the aftermath of this is I was listening to him. He went on a local Pittsburgh station, and he said that Dumoulin and Pettersson were off limits in terms of trade. And those are left D1, left D2. And then behind that, we also have Ricola, Johnson, Matheson, and our prospect Pierre-Olivier Joseph. And so basically the reporter asked, okay, where does this leave Jack Johnson? And because he said, Rutherford, that if the season were to start today, the left side would be Dumoulin, Pettersson, and Matheson, 1, 2, 3. And that leaves out Johnson. And so his response to that was, well, we'll see whether that means he plays on his offside, which I swear to God, if you play Jack Johnson on his offside.
Oh, man.
Or it means he ends up being a healthy scratch. And so maybe this is leading me to believe that Jack Johnson does not make the active roster for the Pittsburgh Penguins when we start our play this year. But
what will it matter when you don't have money to sign a goalie?
But it doesn't matter because we're playing, like, Mike Matheson is better than Jack Johnson, but I'd honestly rather Jack Johnson for 2 more years at 3.3 than to bring in a guy with 6 more years left at 4.8 who's not that great.
All those numbers.
I just don't. We have so many defensemen. It makes no sense. And if you look at the depth of this team, we need more wingers and we need to re-sign our goalies, and this trade just doesn't do any of that.
This doesn't make any sense, and, It's going to be one of those. You know what? I think it's going to be a Leaf situation where it's like now you have to score more than getting scored on. This defense core, no offense, is looking questionable.
And the last thing that was an absolute joke for me is he was talking about we like Matheson because he's offensive-minded and quick, and he fits into our system. And like I said, I'm not saying I would be a better general manager than Jim Rutherford, but when I look at the Penguins roster, this is a roster that's loaded offensively. So you'd think that the focus for your defense would be on defending. You don't need your defense to contribute offensively when you have Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, Jake Gensel, Brian Rust, Jason's. I could go on.
I was going to say Patrick Hornqvist, but...
Right? And also when your top defenseman is an offensive-minded defenseman in Chris Letang. It's the same thing with the Leafs. The Leafs were smart about it. They realized that they have Tavares and Matthews and all of these offensive weapons.
Yeah, we're very offensively minded.
And
we need defense.
Their best defenseman is an offensive guy in Morgan Riley. So who did they bring in? They brought in Jake Muzzin. They brought in a guy who's a defensive-minded, I'm going to stay at home and play defense.
You don't get past the blue line without getting a hit.
Jake Muzzin is there not to contribute offensively. He's there to take care of business in his own end.
He has one of those odd goals from the point.
Like everybody.
Yeah.
But they're looking at Jake Muzzin and they're saying, you need to be a defensive guy. Where Rutherford's looking at Matheson and being like, oh yeah, he can give us 25 points. I don't want him to give us 25 points. I want him to be able to move the puck up to our forwards.
Yeah, and be able to stop the guys from getting 25 points against them.
Especially because you look at our defensive core, Jack Johnson's a liability defensively.
Yep.
Letang, as much as he's an elite defenseman, still isn't as strong defensively as,
wasn't. But, like, if you had Marchand coming down the wing...
Right, like...
And you have a
Letang
guy who...
Letang can be burned.
And he can't take a hit. Marchand can run over him.
Exactly.
Like, Muzzin will stand him up.
Pettersson's more attacking than
6'6".
Outside of it. Yeah. Really, the only defensive-minded defenseman that we have on our roster who's going to routinely play is Brian Dumoulin and John Marino.
Yeah. And both of those are very good defensemen.
Nothing against those two guys, but that's a second-line pairing.
Which is kind of sad to think that those might be your best defenseman pair this year.
No, because
mine did.
Letang and Dumoulin's are going to be our number one, most likely, and then it's going to be Marino, Pettersson, number two, which I don't mind. But my point is you've matched offensive with defensive. And so on that third pairing, I swear to God, if we play Mike Matheson and Jack Johnson as a defensive pair, I'm going to have like an aneurysm watching this team play.
Oh man, you're going to get scored on so many times.
But that's enough about hockey talk and looking at how bad the Pittsburgh Penguins are going to be this coming season. Let's switch to a much more positive light, which is the Los Angeles Lakers are the real deal.
First time in 10 years, LeBron...
10th finals appearance.
Yeah, 10th finals appearance in 10 years. He's unbelievable.
Well, yeah, he missed the one finals trip.
That was
the first year with the Lakers.
And then after that.
I mean, yeah.
Unreal. He's 9 times out of the last 10. Yeah, you're right. That sucks. I really like the Nuggets. I like their story. I like, 3-1 down twice. They've come back. They beat the who'd they play first? They beat the Jazz, Mitchell.
Beat
they
the Jazz.
Mitchell. They
beat the Clippers.
Kawhi. I'm like, oh man, imagine beating LeBron and then the Heat and Nuggets finals would be so unconventional. But the Lakers were obviously the dominant. Playoff LeBron is just not human. He's not human. He was like he's a lot like Kawhi was last year.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he had, I think it was 38, 16, and 10 in the closeout Game 5.
Unreal.
And then there was a point where I think it was a 2 or 3 point game, and then LeBron scored 9 straight points.
Yeah, LeBron just went beast mode. And, he channeled his inner Mamba, said, job's not done. Remember that interview a few years ago when Kobe went to the finals, job's not done? And I think LeBron reminds me a lot like Kobe Bryant. He is playing like a monster. He has that Mamba mentality. He was mentored a lot by Kobe. He looks up to him a lot. I think he's playing a lot like Kobe Bryant, who, as we know, carried his team along far.
Yeah.
But not just LeBron. You got AD there, who's arguably been the best Laker this whole playoffs.
Yeah.
He has been absolutely lights out. You can't guard him.
No.
Like, who on the Heat, which I assume are going to win?
Well, Bam. Bam Adebayo.
But Bam Adebayo was really only known for that one block.
Which was...
Don't get me wrong, it was an absolutely
block.
disgusting block. But what else is he known for?
Well, I mean, he's still very young, right? So obviously we still don't know.
And I think that's the big problem. If the Heat get to the finals, I think the Lakers will take them.
It's a huge test.
But
Absolutely,
but the Heat, Tyler Herro,
37 points for Tyler Herro.
I don't know where this kid came from. I mean, I know where he came from, but man, this guy is good. He's too young, though. He's too young.
Well, and that I agree with you in the sense that maybe there are some parallels with the Nuggets of, it's a team that is making all the right steps and moving forward.
It's just they're not there yet.
They're just not there yet.
They don't have that experience that, like, the Heat in the next 3 years will run the East.
Well,
they will run the East. I don't think Antetokounmpo if he signs with Toronto, yes, Toronto.
I mean, you can never count out the Bucks with Giannis. I think that the Celtics are only getting better. If KD comes back even 90% of the player that he was,
Kyrie and Irving to Brooklyn,
with a fully KD fully recovered, even if he's 90%, because I know when you come back from a serious ACL injury, you're never quite the same player.
Well, it's Achilles.
But and that's a terrible injury. You're never the same player. But even if he's 90% of the player he was, I don't see how you're not terrified of Brooklyn, especially with
Irving too, and Steve Nash as head coach.
Steve Nash is head coach, but also with all those guys injured, the emergence of the talent that Brooklyn has outside of those guys.
I'm not saying don't be afraid of Brooklyn. The East is going to be scary next year. I just think the Heat will be the leaders of that. I think they will lead the pack. And Hitler. Oh, my apologies. Butler. I put Heat and Butler together. My apologies. If Butler.
When you say Butler and Hero, but confused that you combine the two together.
Goodness. Butler, if he resigns, I think. Well, how long is he there for?
Yeah, he's locked up.
He'll be locked up. They'll sign Hero. They'll sign Baum.
Hero's on a rookie contract. Don't need to worry about him.
Not for another few years. These guys will play to get paid, and they are playing to get paid, and they're going to get paid big.
And then I think switching to Miami, there's two questions, and before we start asking the question of can they handle the Lakers, we need to ask the question of can they close out the Celtics?
Yes, they can, and I think they will. Game
6 is tonight.
I think they'll close it out tonight. If not, they'll close it out in Game 7.
Because, once again, it's just like we were talking with hockey. When you have a 3-1 lead and you lose that 5th game, you're almost getting to must-win territory because you want to close it out in 6 because anything can happen in Game 7, especially with this bubble format, especially with as much as the Heat have played incredibly well. I think that on paper, the Celtics have more playmakers.
Okay, the Bucks on paper should have won the East.
Agreed, but my point is, outside of Giannis, I'm not afraid of another player on Milwaukee because I don't trust that Chris Middleton's going to go off for 37 points.
Right.
Tyler Herro already had his game of 37. Maybe I'm counting him out that he can't do it again, but I think that that's his, marquee game for the series.
I think he gets 30 points tonight.
Maybe he does, right?
Yeah, who knows?
Maybe Butler comes out and is huge. Maybe Dragic goes off. But I think that on paper, if it gets to a Game 7, I think that if you look at Tatum and look, I've been highly critical of Kemba Walker. I think that Kemba Walker has been a pedestrian this entire playoff run. I think that the Raptors locked him down with the box and one defense, and then the Heat saw that and started playing zone defense. And when they were playing zone defense, Kemba's done nothing. Jason Tatum had 0 points at halftime. Now, granted, he figured it out and dropped 28 in the second half, and you do have to give him credit for that. But he had 0 points at the half. But at the same time, you want to close these guys out because on any given night, you have Tatum, you have Kemba, you have Jaylen Brown, Gordon Hayward's back. Any of those guys
look good.
Any of those guys can go for 35 points any given night. But you don't want to get to a situation where that could happen in a Game 7.
But it's the matter of fact of will they?
Well, exactly. And that's the question. But you don't even want to give them the opportunity.
But okay, would you have expected Okay, this is kind of backing up your point. Would you have expected Tatum to get 28 in the second and only the second and 0 in the first?
Well, no, but
but they should be getting 28 in the first, 28 in the second.
If you told me Tatum would finish the game with 28 points, I'd say, all right, that's a decent output from him. Now, you obviously, you have question marks about the fact that it's split with 0 and 28, like you said.
Which is, I would have been happier with 14 and 14.
Yeah, no, obviously, you want that consistency. Or maybe you want him to pick it up a little bit in the fourth, but be consistent throughout the game.
Right. I don't know. I think the Heat have shown more consistent play.
I'd agree with that.
And I think if you're going on paper, granted, maybe the Celtics have a lot more depth and experience with Hayward and Tatum and even Walker.
Yeah.
But it's whether or not you put that paper onto play.
Yeah.
And I think the Heat had a lot of things against them. A lot of people did not expect a lot from them. Granted, Butler was great, but no one expected Dragic or Hero to go off like they did.
No.
Maybe Dragic, maybe more than Hero.
You see, Dragic is a solid role player, but I'd agree with you.
They're like, who the hell is Tyler Hero?
Yeah, yeah.
And, I'm sure Heat fans are going to buy jerseys of him after this playoff.
Tyler Hero apparently is a number one selling jersey right now
there
in
go.
the NBA.
Well, there you go, because he's young and he's got a lot of potential. And I think it doesn't matter what you are on paper. The Leafs should have beat Columbus on paper.
Yeah,
you could argue the Raptors should have beat the Celtics on paper.
Or, the Clippers should
have destroyed the Nuggets on paper. But it doesn't matter what you do on paper. You could sign that max million and you still get eliminated in the second round.
The one thing I will say, though, is after Game 4, where it was 3-1 Miami, the combined scores of the series was tied. Because the Heat were winning by 1 possession, 2 possessions. And that's a huge testament to the Heat are closing out the close games.
Which is what we've always...
And that's the sign of a team that can make a serious run at the championship. Yeah. But at the same time, that means the Celtics have been in every single game in this series.
You can be in the whole game. It doesn't matter.
I'd agree with that. But my only concern is I think that if you're the Miami Heat, you have to close out Game 6. I think if the Celtics win Game 6, I think that with that momentum, they win Game 7 and they move on.
I mean, hold on. Technically, when you say close out, that's what the Heat have been doing.
Absolutely.
Whether or not it's 1 point or 11 or 23, it doesn't matter. Yeah. And we've always preached this on this channel, on this podcast. It's the close games you need to close out.
Absolutely.
And it just goes to show that the Boston Celtics are unable to do it.
It seems like it. It's
going to show this.
They closed out those games against the Raptors.
Yeah, well, the Raptors obviously Spinny Siakam or Mild P, whatever you want to call him. He was obviously terrible, and the Raptors did not play to their full potential.
Of course.
But the Heat are playing to the full potential, and it looks like the Celtics maybe considered the Heat an easier team than the Raptors.
I'd agree with that. I think they were caught off guard.
Which I think is absolutely disgraceful if you're a Boston Celtic. You can't go. It doesn't matter if it's the Eastern Conference against a team you think doesn't deserve to be there, or it's the first round against the Lakers. You play each team with the respect and the amount of integrity that they deserve to have.
No,
They're there the same way they have. And if they still think that they can beat this Heat because they think they're just better than them, then play like it.
No, you're right.
Don't give me 0 points in the first half and 20 in the second. Don't be like that.
You should be, and I think they should be concerned because Kemba is being stalked by box and one zone. These are high school defense packages.
And Kemba is a guy who's been in the league for so long now, and if he's not able to adapt to these, like you said, high school lockdowns, then what are you gonna how are you expected to get? It just, to me, it doesn't make any sense to why. No offense, but you could be as good as you want on paper. You could have LeBron, KD, AD. Look, you could be all of that. But if y'all are playing like Kemba Walker, then it doesn't matter what you do.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. And I mean, with all the weapons that you have there, I think that, and especially a fantastic coach in Brad Stevens, where you 100%. Think that they would be able to make those adjustments. And you could argue maybe you're seeing those adjustments because they fall behind early in the series, but they win Game 5. Maybe if they win Game 6, you start to see that Stevens is making those adjustments, but it might still be too late.
You should not be going down. If you're the team that everyone says you are, you should be going up.
No, absolutely. You shouldn't have been down 3-1 to begin with.
No, you shouldn't. And not only 3-1 down, you should have been down in Game 5. You shouldn't have been down in Game 4. You should have been able to play to your potential. If they played their potential, the Raptors wouldn't even be out. They'd be in this round. Yeah. But if you play to your potential, the Celtics, no way, would lose to the Heat. Just because of what you said on paper, but they're not playing to it.
And that's why it'll be very interesting to see which version of the Boston Celtics we get tonight.
Yeah, we're going to see the Toronto Raptors lockdown, or are we going to see Game 1, Game 2 of these guys?
Yeah.
Okay, let's move to baseball. There's a whole NBA thing we can go off on.
But yeah, it's important to switch over to baseball because we really haven't talked about it at all.
Well, it's kind of for the past few years, just not really relevant.
But also with the shortened season this year, I think that for the majority of the time, I think that unless you're a diehard baseball fan, and no disrespect to those guys, but that's just not who we are. No. We're not necessarily the biggest baseball fans, but obviously when it comes to the playoffs, you got to talk about it. But I think with the regular season, it was almost like 60 games. You just got to be good enough to get in. because anything can happen in the playoffs. And when I say anything, we mean anything. Like we were talking about in the first episode of this podcast where we were breaking down the qualifiers in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And we were saying best of 5 series,
All you
never
need to do
know.
is get hot for 3 games.
You never know. And what did we saw? We saw the Habs take out the Penguins.
Chicago
we saw Chicago take out the Oilers.
Columbus
take out Toronto. So there were some huge upsets. Now you get into the baseball wild card rounds in baseball, and it's a best of 3. So you talk about you only need to get hot and win 3 games. In baseball now, in the first round, you only need to get hot and win 2. And as we're recording, it's the last day of the regular season, so matchups aren't confirmed. So instead of making predictions, and the other thing is I don't want to make predictions on a best of 3 series.
No, it's impossible. It's almost impossible.
It is impossible. But so what we'll do is we'll sort of talk about some of the we'll talk about the teams that are going to be in the playoffs.
Well, let's just say, thank God the Jays are in.
Yep.
Obviously, I think it's a little too early. I just want to briefly talk about them. I think it's too early for them. I don't think the rebuild is completely the way they want it to be.
Not yet.
I think this will be good for the obviously
Absolutely. For the young players.
For the young guys.
For Vlad and Bichette. Yeah.
Kirk, Captain Kirk.
Yeah.
Obviously, I love him. He's my favorite player right now.
Yeah, it'll be their first playoff games.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's why, and you talk about it, I'd love if Ryu can pitch a gem of a game and steal us a game against the other team's ace.
Well, if you look at Ryu's so far, he's 5-2 on the season.
He's played well.
He's played excellent. He's got like a 2 ERA or something. He's been absolutely lights out. He's exactly what the Blue Jays need, except we just need more of that.
Yeah, and I think that if he gets us a win,
which I think he can.
I think that would be fantastic if he could do that and give us a start, because it would be incredible. So you're right.
I think he starts game 1.
5-2 this year with a 2.69 ERA.
Do you think he starts game 1?
Absolutely.
I think he should. I think that's definitely the way you want to start off.
Yeah, and that's a point. And I think that if the Jays can win this first round, best of 3 series, and we'll talk about some other teams too that are sort of in the same boat. And I think the big example is the Padres, San Diego, in the National League. Now, granted, the San Diego Padres are a little bit further ahead with their rebuild because they have some seriously good pieces down there.
Deadly, though.
And they've looked very good. But my point is, if these types of teams can get past that first round and get into a normal divisional series, best of 5, like it will be next year when things get back to normal, that's the real playoff experience that you want. Because it's one thing to say you make the playoffs and then lose 2 games and then get
eliminated.
Were we really in the playoffs? Right?
Yeah, well, I guess, but then again, hockey and basketball, it's the same thing.
Exactly, yeah.
Basketball, no, not basketball. They didn't have a qualifying.
No, but I agree with you in hockey in the sense of, those qualifier teams, does it really count as the playoffs?
Well, they counted it as playoff stats, so...
Yes, but once again, it's kind of like, all right, we played 3 games and we're going home.
Yeah.
But let's talk about some of the top teams. Looking at the American League, Tampa Bay is the number 1 seed in the American League.
Remember when Tampa Bay was so garbage?
Yeah. I mean, they kind of have this, they're really good at developing their prospects.
They're excellent.
And then obviously because they're a smaller market team, they can't necessarily, they have a very small payroll.
And it goes to show, we pick up their GM or their manager, Al Montoya.
Yeah.
And they're still able to thrive.
But, Charlie Morton, once again, my baseball knowledge not the greatest, but I know Charlie Morton as their pitcher is an absolute monster.
He's disgusting. He's absolutely shut down. Like, that's why they have so many wins.
Yeah. And so that's my point of I would be afraid to face a pitcher like that.
I don't want to play Tampa Bay in the first round. If you're a Jays fan, you want to play, in my opinion, someone like Chicago, the White Sox, or
the
Oakland A's.
Yeah.
Minnesota scares me a little bit. I wouldn't mind playing them.
Because Minnesota's offense is lethal.
Well, it's Donaldson's on that team.
Yeah.
The bringer of rain comes back, plays his old team and just shuts them down. I can see that.
Yeah.
I'd rather play Chicago or Oakland, like you said, which is very odd because both of these teams are in my opinion, significantly better than us. Significantly better than us.
Yeah. And, we can talk about some of those other teams. Let's look at the Minnesota Twins, the Oakland Athletics, the Chicago White Sox. Any of those, what do you think about those teams and their ability to maybe go further?
Well, I guess, Chicago's really kind of surprised me. They've kind of been one of those really, really quiet lethal weapons where they have a lot of power and a lot of defense, and it's
They have
really
some
good.
players that you don't
Also,
realize.
quick update. Sorry, this is for hockey. Steven Stamkos will be out for the rest of the series.
Yeah, which I think we all kind of expected.
Yeah. So Chicago. Sorry, go back to baseball. So Chicago.
I mean, they have Anderson, Moncada, Abreu, Encarnacion, Mazzara. Like, they have bats in that lineup.
And their pitching is not terrible either.
Not terrible.
Like they were one of the garbage garbage teams of the MLB, and they've come out and they've said, you know what, we don't care what you think of us. We're going to take the league by storm. And I think they've taken it by storm, and I think they've been playing absolutely out of their mind. Minnesota, I think Josh Donaldson has been, obviously he will never be Josh Donaldson like he was 4 years ago.
But he's not the guy in Minnesota. And the thing with Tampa, Tampa has really good pitching, and I'd rather play really good hitting versus really good pitching in a best-of-3 series because obviously the Twins, like I said, you look at the weapons that the White Sox have at bat. The Twins, you have Donaldson, Nelson Cruz, you have Sano, Polanco, Buxton. Like, there's a lot of weapons on that team as well. But I don't really think they have, like, a primary guy in the bullpen or in the rotation where you're going to be intimidated to go up against them.
Yeah, and honestly, I think that's excellent. I think it takes the pressure off him, significantly. Remember when he was here in 2016? It was he's up to bat. Oh, he's got to hit something, or it goes to third. He's got to make a play. I think him going to a team that doesn't require him to be that guy every single game. Like, it's good to have him. Expect him to play good against the Jays when they play, or play against a team where they need him to play good. But when you're playing those Baltimore, those bottom half of the league teams, you don't need him to be stellar.
Yeah.
You just need him to get a hit every now and then, and you'll be okay with it.
And I think the Athletics should be a scary good team. I mean, they have Simeon, Scotty, Lamb, like Canna, Davis. They have some bats there as well.
It's just like you said, I don't want to play like if you're the Padres, you don't want to play the Dodgers.
Right, exactly.
Their pitching is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Kershaw is out of his mind.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see if playoff Kershaw shows up, which is
he always does though. Every year he's
Kershaw's garbage in the playoffs.
Nah, he's only he's only bad because Houston cheated.
I mean, maybe in like the last year, but Kershaw, man, he's been dominant for 15 years in the regular season, and then he just can't get it done in the playoffs.
Reminds me a lot of a Tampa Bay.
Yeah, kind of funny.
He's like the Stamkos.
But I think the American League's very interesting because you have all these sort of teams that have come on the rise this year in Tampa Bay, Minnesota, Oakland, Chicago.
Well, you could argue Tampa Bay's been on the rise since 2 years ago.
Exactly, but these are sort of the young, like not younger teams, but sort of younger, fresher blood. And then you look at some of the teams that you'd expect to be at the top: the Yankees, the Astros, and the Indians.
Oh, the Indians, yeah.
Right? So Cleveland, New York, and Houston are seeded 5, 6, 7. So they're going to be in the playoffs.
Barely.
Obviously, the Blue Jays are 8th, and we've talked about them. But you got to say that, the Yankees, Houston, Cleveland, these are teams that were supposed to be like 3 of the best teams in the league.
They should have been the top 3 of the league.
Do you have faith in these teams picking it up in the playoffs when it matters?
Houston, no.
I'd agree with that because they don't have garbage cans on their side.
They don't have Verlander.
That too. Like, looking at it from a legit who's on our roster standpoint.
They don't have their best pitcher.
They don't have their best pitcher.
Yankees, no. Yankees,
really?
Yes. Judge came back.
Yeah, I think
Stanton came back.
I think the Yankees were, they had so many injuries. And also, I think they just were playing like garbage, and I think they picked it up recently.
They got lucky. They got a Jays team that let them have 43 runs in 3
Exactly,
games.
yeah.
And then
Cleveland.
Who's the other team, Cleveland? That's weird. They have been very dominant in the past 5 years. What? I don't know.
It almost seems like they're just sort of at the end of that potential
2016
window, right?
That Game 7, they should. Oh, the Cubs.
They got so close, yeah.
Yeah, like they were there. They had it right there. They tied it up in like the 7th, and they just lost it. I think that was their. Arguably, I think that was their only window.
Absolutely, I'd agree with you. I think that I'd be terrified to play the Yankees just because.
Well, our record is not good against them.
If they can figure it out,
we're screwed.
Like, forget just the Blue Jays. Like, if the Yankees play up to their potential, I think the only team that can, challenge them are the Dodgers.
That's ballsy to say. I don't know.
It's just a matter of they've been underperforming and injured. So I'd be afraid to play the Yankees because if they figure it out, good luck. It's like the same thing. It's like Tampa Bay. If they figure it out, Tampa Bay wins the Stanley Cup. And it looks like they're very close to figuring it out because they're a win away. But when they didn't figure it out, they got bounced last year and the year before and right. And I think the Yankees are like that this year, where it's like if there's nobody stopping them if they figure it out. I think, and we'll switch to the National League. I think when you look at the Dodgers and you look at the Yankees, they're the only two teams that can stop each other if they figure it out. The thing is, the Dodgers seem to have it figured out this year, which is why they're 42-17, and the Yankees haven't, which is why they're 33-26.
The Dodgers have kind of always figured it out. Getting into the playoffs.
Yeah, it's a matter of the playoffs. Yeah.
It's been a breeze for them, obviously, getting in. You know what? Again, I guess in this case, you can make an exception saying injuries actually did plague the team, and you can make an excuse because once all the injuries came back, they started playing like Yankee baseball.
Yeah.
Which is terrifying baseball, which is, if you're a Blue Jay, is a flashback baseball. We don't want to play them. I would not want to play the Yankees.
No, absolutely.
Yeah. Your thoughts on who's going to win the World Series this year?
I was going to say, we can go league by league. So then I guess before we switch over to the National League, who do I have coming out of the American League? Ooh, once again, I don't want to make this prediction until we're down to 4 teams and the best of 3 series is out of the way. And
that's not part. You got
of course. On next week's podcast, we'll be able to have a more in-depth playoff preview when we actually know like the legitimate teams that are on to the divisional round. If I had to pick now.
Okay, let's go through every single one. Let's start the AL East.
I don't trust the Yankees to get out of the American League. So if I look at these 8 teams, if I had to pick a team, I think...
What 8 teams are you talking about?
Like the 8 teams in the American League that are in the playoffs. I'm going to go Minnesota. I'm going to go Minnesota to come out of the American League.
Okay. What about the National League?
And then, switching over to the National League before we make predictions.
Let's just take a moment and say the Marlins are preceding everyone's expectations this year.
Yeah, so actually that was going to be my question to you. So obviously the Dodgers are the cream of the crop of the National League.
7-12 record, percentage.
42-17. Looking at the teams below them, I'll list them off and I want you to tell me, do you think any of these teams can challenge them? You have the Atlanta Braves, Chicago Cubs, San Diego Padres, St. Louis Cardinals, Miami Marlins, Cincinnati Reds, and the Milwaukee Brewers. As it stands right now in the 8th seed, the San Francisco Giants and the Philadelphia Phillies can get in, but it's unlikely that the Phillies will. I think that the 8th seed as of right now, going into the last day of the season, is between Milwaukee and San Francisco. But it seems like if anyone's going to challenge the Dodgers, it would be Atlanta, Chicago, San Diego, St. Louis, or Miami.
No one.
Yeah.
No, not a chance. The only one I can honestly say would be the Cubs.
Yeah,
I say the Cubs. I don't even think the Braves could handle them as well.
I think the Braves might be able to figure it out. I just don't know if I trust the Braves pitching. I think that the Braves lineup, like bat for bat, comes pretty darn close to the Dodgers.
You can argue that the Braves are going to make a really good push against it's just the Dodgers. There's no way.
No, I'd agree with you.
And I think Anthony Rizzo over there has figured, I don't want to say he's figured it out. He's won a World Series, but he's definitely bounced back.
Yeah, I just think the Cubs aren't the same team that they were in 2016.
No, obviously not. But there's still a lot of pieces there that are important to their success.
Right.
I think you know what? I think the Cubs, if the Cubs beat the Dodgers, they win the World Series.
Ooh, that's a big claim.
That is a ballsy claim, I know. But if you have that momentum, if you're able to beat the Dodgers, you have that momentum.
I just don't see the Cubs doing. I think that the team that has the best shot at doing it is the Braves, and then I'd even say the Padres, just because, especially with baseball, it's about a matter of how hot you can get. And I'm not saying that the Padres are going to go far. I just think that, if you talk about momentum, they have all of it. And it'll be interesting to see if that plays a factor.
I mean, in the 3 games, 2 games is all you need, and there's really nothing stopping you except yourself.
Yeah.
Same goes for Blue Jays. If you're Bichette, if you're Vladdy, if you're Montoya, you're like, guys, we're not expected to be here. Let's play like it. This Blue Jays team reminds me a lot of that 2016-2017 Leafs team that went against Washington in the first round. They're just building this could be franchise dynasty.
No one was mad when they got knocked out because they were happy because they played so well.
And they took 5 of the games to overtime.
Yeah.
So, you can argue it goes either way. But, you know what? They got nothing to lose. They don't have these expectations. They're just in. They're going to have some fun. They're going to hit some home runs. Captain Kirk's going to steal for 3. It's going to be absolutely 5'9", 280 pounds or something like that?
Monster.
Absolute beast.
So, World Series predictions then. I already said I think I think it'll be Dodgers beat the Twins.
So, obviously, I think the Dodgers will make it to the World Series. I think Tampa makes it.
Tampa?
I think Tampa goes the distance.
All right.
I think Tampa and the Dodgers will take it to the very final game. I think Tampa, okay, so the Dodgers are very highly skilled in pitching. Very, very deadly in skill. I mean, their bats are good too, but I'm looking at Tampa and I'm like, I like that roster a little bit better for the bats. So I think it's going to come down to, am I going to hit you more, or hit off of you more, or are you going to strike me out more? And I think it's going to come down to pitching versus hitting.
Yeah, I think that's fair. So there you go. We have Dodgers beating the Rays and Dodgers beating the Twins.
We have Dodgers winning it this year.
I mean, and I think that, once again, anything can happen in the playoffs, but... it's
watch what Dodgers don't make it past the first.
But it's like a basketball story where you look at it and you're like, okay, the Lakers are the best team and they should win it, and so there's nothing wrong with picking the Lakers. And I think it's the same thing here, where if you look at it on paper, the Dodgers are the clear.
I mean, also in practice,
contenders.
They're 42-17.
Yeah,
they're not just on paper. They're just there.
No, that's what I mean. On paper and in performance, they are the clear World Series favorites. Yeah, and we've seen the Lakers now. They're 4 wins away.
LA could win 2 championships this year.
Yeah,
which would be terrifying.
I mean, the Rams are 2-0, but I doubt they're moving on. And speaking of that, we'll move into some football. But
let's do quickly.
Instead of talking about the NFL, I want to switch over and show some love to the college side of things, because obviously still very early on in the season, but some interesting results going on around the world of college football. Obviously still heating up, as the Big Ten still hasn't played any games yet, but we can look at some of the other schools, and Oklahoma falling to Kansas State. That's a huge loss for them. A very disappointing performance from the Sooners, and so that's a huge letdown for them. And we look at some of the other top teams. LSU, obviously, coming off of that national championship, but so many pieces offensively, so many pieces defensively, lost to the NFL. And what happens? They lose their first game at home against Mississippi State. Mississippi State's quarterback, I'm just going to 36 of 60 for 623 yards and 5 touchdowns. So LSU, a school that, obviously Joe Burrow had a monster season, but LSU prided themselves on their defensive ability, and that was a big reason for their national championship. They gave up 44 points and 600 passing yards to Mississippi State. So I don't think LSU is going to be in the playoff picture this year.
Everyone got drafted.
Yeah, and I think that's the reason why.
That's really all it is everyone got drafted. You had your moment.
Yeah.
You had your year. You had that crazy party with OBJ, who got fined a couple of dollars for what he said.
Yeah.
But damn, you don't care. That one video I saw in slow motion of Joe Burrow walking out with a cigar in his mouth. Absolute legend.
They had their year. It looks like LSU is going to take a step back this year. Looking at some of their competition in conference, Alabama wins. No shock there.
Surprise.
Obviously, they've moved away. No longer Tua at quarterback. But, they were grooming Mac Jones at quarterback.
Speaking of, let me ask you, do you think Tua starts this year?
Maybe. I don't think so, though. I think they want a full year for him to get healthy and then sit behind Fitzmagic. I don't think he starts.
We were discussing at school. Was saying, what if they play? What if you're playing like a Jacksonville team that's like 0-14 or 1-7?
I say maybe you give him 1 or 2 starts right at the end, but I think
he should.
They care about his health and his learning more.
And you know what? I appreciate Miami for that. Miami's been kind of a dumpster fire for the past few years. But
speaking of Miami, switching over to Miami's college team.
Good segue.
Yeah, I try. Miami, the Hurricanes, they are a team that say they're an elite level team. Obviously, huge football program. Going back
one of the
years,
biggest. Oh,
one
man.
of the biggest. I mean, you look at the old days where they were winning national championships with this, certain Tim Tebow behind center.
Tim who?
Yeah.
Tim.
The best Mets baseball baseball prospect.
Hey, he was actually hitting those dingers, eh?
In single A.
So what?
But no, Miami. Obviously, they started off really strong. Their first big test against Florida State, they won 52-10.
Nice.
And obviously, you look at their quarterback.
That's
some
a statement.
questions are going to be asked about King's ability. He was solid.
Statement win.
And I think that's a big statement win for Miami, where they're 3-0, and they're saying, obviously, they're in a conference with Clemson, and so the big question mark for Miami is if they can beat everyone else in the ACC, because that's not the strongest conference. Let's be honest. Not the strongest conference.
We'll be honest.
But if they can get through a lot of their conference opponents, if they can put up a good fight against Clemson and some of these other teams, you look at LSU obviously already has a loss. They're going to drop down. Oklahoma has a loss. They're going to drop down.
Yeah.
If Miami has one loss, and their one loss is in the ACC title game to Clemson, maybe that puts them in the conversation. Obviously, still very, very early, but I think I got to say Miami looks to be potentially the real deal.
Yeah. Well, again, it's too early. They're only 3-0.
Exactly. It's still very early, but, it is interesting to talk about. Another team, Auburn, they won again. They're ranked 7th in the country. That might go up. The other big team, Florida, they won big, and the big question mark Florida was whether Kyle Trask at quarterback would take the next step. Well, 30 of 42 for 416 yards and 6 touchdowns sounds like a pretty good performance from him. And so Florida, I think Florida might be a real big dark horse team coming out of the SEC East. Obviously, the SEC West, typically the tougher conference, but that'll lead to a good matchup against Georgia later on in the season. Of course, Georgia winning big against Arkansas. So obviously, still very early.
It's too early.
College football,
it's too early.
I mean, this is where you start to see which teams are elite and which teams maybe aren't so much. So you look at teams like LSU, Oklahoma losing, teams like Alabama, Georgia, and Miami and Florida all winning pretty comfortably. So you're starting to see that separation of talent. And then obviously switching to the NFL, any storylines that you want to talk about in the NFL? So many injuries.
Oh, my goodness. The San Francisco
practice squad.
I mean, I want to feel bad for that team, but I don't know why. I just don't like that team.
Yeah.
And just maybe it's because their coach is the biggest choke.
Yeah, obviously, you don't want them. Obviously, you wish for a speedy recovery for all their injured players.
Yeah, of course. I wish no one to get hurt. Yeah. That sucks. It really does suck when you're expected to do so much this season. You're so excited and you lose everyone, and it goes to show how important those practice exhibition
Yeah, well, a lot of people saying that the fact that there's no preseason is a big reason for that. And it's not only that, but, obviously you want to watch the best players take the field. And for us to have, amongst other players, Bosa injured, Saquon Barkley injured, Christian McCaffrey injured.
Yeah.
And then going into this week, Julio Jones was inactive this week. And Chase Young, of course, the second overall draft pick out of Ohio State, injured for the football team. Still weird saying that, but injured for the football team. That's a huge loss because, you talked about people wanting to see Tua get game time.
Here's a second rounder.
Here's a top 5 pick
speaking of, let's just go. 49ers are leading by 10 against the Giants, 16-6 at halftime.
Is it? I swore it was 6-6.
It was, yeah. And then they got a touchdown and a field goal. The Cleveland Browns are leading by 10 at the third quarter. The Bengals are keeping it close with the Eagles. It's 13-10 for the Eagles.
The Eagles are Carson Wentz is washed up, in my opinion, and they have a ton of injuries. So
the Bills are absolutely dominating the Rams. They're 21-3.
that would be a big statement win for the Bills, because I think this is the year where they could really. I mean, this is the year where they should win the division, and that means that they could do some serious damage in the playoffs. They'll be a tough out.
Honestly, the Bills right now look like the best team in the league. Well,
I wouldn't go that far.
Top three.
I'd say top five. Top five.
I'd say it's KC,
Kansas City, Baltimore.
I'd say it's Baltimore, KC, Buffalo. Who would you put ahead of them in my
Seattle?
That's Russell. I think
Seattle.
But I think Buffalo, for what they're given compared to Seattle, if you had like a Monday night, because that's the big night.
Right.
If you went Buffalo against Seattle, in Buffalo, or even in Seattle,
I'd take Seattle.
I'd still take Buffalo.
I'd take Seattle. And the reason why is because Josh Allen is playing unbelievable, but I don't think he can keep it up for the whole season, and I think that... I think
you're wrong. I think he can go the whole way, and I think he can go into the playoffs, too. I think, granted, he's no Mahomes. Mahomes definitely developed...
Let me, clarify my statement. No. I agree with you. I think that Allen is obviously going to take a step up this year from last year, but my point is after 2 weeks, he's got 750 yards and 6 touchdowns. I don't think he's going to give you 350 passing yards and 3 touchdowns every week.
Well, how do you know that?
That's my point. I don't know that. I just don't see
I know
him.
Russell has been doing that. Wilson has been doing that, so why can't Josh do it?
Because
he's doing it so far.
I don't think Josh Allen is at that level yet.
He's thrown 2 touchdowns already.
I agree with you, and so my point is it'll be interesting to see. I just don't think he can keep that up. I'd love to see him prove me wrong because, obviously growing up in Toronto, I'm a Giants fan, not a Bills fan, but it's always nice to see the Bills
succeed.
Do well.
Because I've seen so many terrible
they're such a
years.
cursed franchise.
Oh.
But
yeah, I know.
I think if I had to pick a top 5 right now in terms of teams, I would go Baltimore, Kansas City, Seattle, Pittsburgh, Buffalo.
No. I'm sorry, but no. In my opinion, no. Look at, Jared Goff has thrown 1 interception. Josh Allen is 11 for 15, 12 for 16, 174 yards, 2 touchdowns.
Yeah.
He's thrown a minimum 2 touchdowns every week.
And that's what I say. I'm actually impressed with his performance.
I love the way he's
against
playing.
a pretty decent Rams team. You look Jalen Ramsey, Michael Brockers, of course Aaron Donald.
Yep. So it goes to show that I think for Buffalo it's going to be... These are easy wins for them. I think LA is the only one who's really given them a tough time.
Yeah, and this is
but
a
they're
big
winning
statement win.
23-3
if they can hold it off. My point is I think the Bills will go as far as Allen will take them. And from what we've seen, when Allen is playing incredibly well, the Bills look unstoppable. So it'll be interesting to see if they can keep that up.
They look dominant. And I think Russell, I think the Bills have dominated each of their games they've played so far. The Seahawks have had some pretty close games.
Yeah.
You know what team is also a little bit on the really on the upper right now is Dallas.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Well, look, if they come back from 29 to 7 or something and they win that game, granted, I don't know if Atlanta decided not to play football for about 5 seconds.
Right.
That game could have... What were they thinking? Let me ask you for a question. For those of you who don't know...
Well, yeah, we talked about it last week.
Yeah.
I
know we talked about it last week, but you have a week to kind of sink in and look back at it and watch highlight. What were they thinking?
Yeah.
Okay, correction. Why weren't they thinking?
That's just... It's coaching. It's everything.
It's common sense.
Yeah.
These guys are making millions for a year, not to...
Anyways, so we are going to wrap up this podcast with actually one last segment that I want to do, which is we're going to go through the list of teams that are 2-0 in the NFL, and we're going to go through. I'm going to ask you, are they for real or are they pretenders?
Are they real or fake?
Are they real or fake? So let's start with the 2-0 Green Bay Packers.
Real. Oh, yeah. Oh, Aaron Rodgers looks nasty.
Aaron Rodgers' revenge tour. I think they drafted Jordan Love. I think we've talked about it before. He's going for it.
You said some explicit words there.
2-0 Chicago Bears.
Fake. Trubisky is on a high right now, but once that high comes crashing down, they're going to lose 6 or 7 in a row.
Also, let's quantify that they won against Detroit and the Giants both by 4 points.
So, yeah, not very statement wins like Buffalo is.
The 2-0 Arizona Cardinals. This is the tough one.
I think they're real. I think they're real this year.
I agree with you.
I think they'll make the playoffs. I have them winning this year in my pool. They're playing who, Detroit?
They're playing Detroit at 4:30 today.
So that should be a win. Should be a win.
Then they play Carolina.
Win.
Then they play the Giants.
Win.
Then they play the Cowboys on Monday Night Football. And they could go into...
Is it in Dallas?
It's in Dallas. They could go into Dallas on Monday Night Football at 5-0, and that would be a huge...
That would be a big win.
Huge possible statement win.
That would be great.
But I agree with you. I think the Cardinals are for real. I think they will be 5-0, and I think that will be a huge Monday night matchup.
That would be great. Okay, let's keep going.
The 2-0 LA Rams are soon to be 2-1, so I guess you're calling them fake.
Fake.
Yeah.
Jared Goff's overrated.
Plus, I mean, they're in a tough division. I don't see them getting a lot of divisional wins against Arizona, Seattle, and San Fran.
I agree. That's a tough division.
Speaking of 2-0 teams in that division, the 2-0 Seattle Seahawks.
Oh, they're for real. They could go back to the finals.
I mean, I picked them to win the Super Bowl,
yeah,
and
well, there
I'm
not
sounding too crazy
I
after
still
week
got the
2.
Chiefs, but that's definitely a very good pick.
We already talked about the 2-0 Bills.
Real. Oh, there's not even... They were real for last year, too.
And then I think that the next two are pretty big real as well. The 2-0 Ravens.
Not a question.
And the 2-0 Steelers.
Question.
Really?
Yeah.
In what way? Big Ben?
Who
you
have
don't
they played
trust
so
him?
far? Who have they played so far?
The Pittsburgh Steelers beat the Giants week 1, 26-16.
Okay.
Then they beat the Denver Broncos 26-21.
Denver almost came back from that game.
They did.
They have some questions on defense, in my opinion.
You see, I disagree. I think they have questions on offense. I think their defense is the reason they're winning the games.
I think the reason they're winning is because Big Ben's able to throw 2 or 3 touchdowns a game, and then after that, their defense just kind of implodes. I know you watch more Pittsburgh than me, and
I don't know about that because I think the Steelers are a top 5 defense in the NFL.
So then why are they allowing Denver to come back? Like, what's their excuse?
They weren't. It's
the
offense wasn't moving the ball.
Well, that's not true. They got 26 points.
In the game against Denver, I think the Steelers had like 7 sacks and an interception.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter. They still allowed 21 points from the Broncos against a backup quarterback.
That's true, but I think you look at the Steelers' defense, they've given up...
Who they gave up the first one, the Giants?
They gave up 16 points in week 1, 21 points in week 2. I think if you only give up 20 points a game, you'd expect the Steelers' offense to win the majority of those games. So I think the Steelers are real.
They're winning because they played garbage teams, and
That's fair.
The Bills are leading 28-3. So
That's fair.
They're playing the Giants and the Broncos, and the Broncos almost won that game.
That's fair. All right, and then we have the 2-0 Tennessee Titans.
Real.
Yep.
I think Tannehill is playing up to his contract. I definitely think signing him was probably the best thing they could have done. I don't personally see another. I think he retires there. Honestly, I can see retire. And Derrick Henry, my goodness.
Yeah.
My goodness. Enough said. Ridiculous.
Okay, 2-0 Chiefs, moving on for real.
I have them winning the Super Bowl.
And finally, the 2-0 Las Vegas Raiders. A surprise victory, some might say, on Monday Night Football against the Saints. They opened up their new the Death Star, as they like to call it, out there in the desert with a big victory.
They're real. They beat the Saints.
They're down 3 against the Patriots at the half. It'll be interesting to see if they can get to 3-0.
They slapped the Saints. They said, "Okay, you're gonna take a lead. We're gonna slap you right back."
No Michael Thomas.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, hold on. No Michael Thomas. So what? You are Drew Brees. You are a reigning Stanley. Not reigning from last year, but you have a Super Bowl.
I agree with you. I need to point it out. I agree with you. I don't think that's enough of a factor.
That's not.
I think this shows how reliant they are on that 5-yard slant to Michael Thomas.
And you know what?
Which is why he has about 175 catches every year.
And you know who Michael Thomas reminds me of? Stephon Diggs. Minnesota was so reliant on him. Like, Cousins would not throw to anyone else. And look what's going on in Buffalo. And that's why Buffalo, I think, is top 3.
And look what's going on in Minnesota because they're 0-2.
Like, I think this is why Kirk Cousins is overrated 100%. This is why I think Buffalo, in my opinion, is better than Seattle. Is because now Josh Allen has this weapon. He's got this weapon. And the running backs, absolutely nuts. But he's got this weapon who he can throw touchdowns to. He didn't have that last year.
Yeah.
He's got Diggs now, and Diggs is making his money. Like, Diggs last year, he's used to catching all these. He made the Minnesota Miracle. He's used to working under pressure. He's used to playing in big games. He's used to making catches. They're leading 28-3.
Yep, like I said, that would be a huge statement win if they can win in such a dominant fashion against the Rams,
I think, honestly,
which it looks like they're going to do.
I think fans are coming back too.
Yeah,
because they wouldn't let him come in until like after a certain week.
Yeah, and like I said, as the season unfolds, it'll be very interesting to follow that. Just quickly before we wrap up, any other stories you want to quickly touch upon? Any other world of sports?
Diggs got a touchdown.
There you go.
So he gets at least one every game, and I think it'll be very interesting this next week. There's going to be a lot of statement wins in this next week, and I think, like you said, in the next 3 or 4 weeks will be a make or break for a team. It always has been.
Yep.
I think Arizona going to play, was it Seattle in a few weeks?
Dallas week 6, Seattle week 7, and they could go into that matchup at 5-0 going into those 2 games.
Which you and I both agree think they can do. Kyler Murray's developing like
Murray's looked really well. He looks like mini Lamar Jackson.
Honestly, yeah. Just missing that extra step.
Yeah, like I said, he looks like a slightly weaker version of Lamar Jackson. Because Lamar Jackson can throw the ball, and so can Kyler Murray.
Oh, man, Lamar Jackson, though, he is fun to watch. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But other than that, I think it's a good time to be a sports fan. Right?
Absolutely. So, any parting words?
Browns are leading.
There you go.
I can't remember who they're playing. Let me pull that up real quick.
They're beating a pretty garbage team.
Listen, they could go 2-1.
Are they playing the football team? They're playing the football team. That's an easy.
The football team beat Philadelphia in the first week.
That's true. I should be saying these things because the Giants are probably going to lose them twice this year. So on that note, we thank you again for listening to another episode of Benchwarmers Sports Talk. Wherever you are listening to. If you're listening on YouTube, feel free to drop a like. If you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to us, review, 5-star, like. Everything is very much appreciated. We appreciate you listening every week, and we'll see you again next week. On behalf of Jacob, thank you again for listening, and we will see you next time on the bench.